Hi, my name is Shannon, and I'm Willamette Week's music and visual arts editor. I'm talking with artist Ebenezer Galluzzo, who recently started releasing into the world um, a new series of portraits that he created during a residency at the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. Ebenezer, could you maybe start by telling us a little bit about what your goals were, like initially going into this residency, and like what sort of themes you were hoping to explore?
Yeah, I'll do a little intro of myself too. Hi, I'm Ebenezer Galluzzo. I use he, him pronouns. And when I went out to Sitka, the intention that I held going out there was seeking an answer to the question, what would it be like if the landscape around me were the mirror to see myself in? I have a wonderful community of friends and family that I use as my mirror. I also have a lot of social media and just a lot of random strangers that can be a mirror to me too. So it was a question of what's it like when just the earth below me, these natural things can reflect back to me that I'm a natural, my existence is a part of nature, not an exception to it.
Yeah, what were some things that you found? I know that this is partially in your series, but
That's
what are
fine.
yeah, what are things that you found in nature that were particularly, like, affirming or challenging for that question?
The things that I found affirming was the absence of language and words to have the environment, which is chaotic and majestic and expansive and yet minute and messy, felt like a relief. I'm really grateful for language in terms of understanding myself. Um, but it also felt like a place where I could see the bigness and the multifacetedness of uh, who I am and who everybody is, really. But to see myself in that light was very freeing. And the challenges that arose were the the parts of nature that I don't think about always. When I think of nature, I think of something that's beautiful and grand and inspiring, which it is. But there's also, like uh, death and decay and a lot of elk poop was there too.
Well, I mean, the other thing that happened when you were out there was, the stay-at-home order hit for the state, so what was it like to, yeah, get that information while you're doing this whole thing?
I will be honest. I think it was the best place to receive very intense, scary information because I was already really far away from people. So the reality of the stay at home order and the reality of isolating from people didn't quite settle into what that meant when I would go back home because I was already in a place of doing that in a way and enjoying that space. Um, yeah.
Yeah, how has it been different, that kind of isolating and now isolating with your husband and your kid?
It's I think I described it to a friend as not having a lot of personal space necessarily and yet feeling lonely sometimes. I have, we're kind of respect each other's space a whole lot, but missing a lot of my other friendships and relationships that I can't physically be around is challenging. So it's a different type of disconnect. I think.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of a different type of disconnect, so you how has it been, like, putting out all this, like, vulnerable personal work into the world when galleries aren't open in a normal way? Yeah.
Thank you for asking that question. um, it's uh, it's sharing this work that is all self portraiture. Um, already is a bit because it's so personal. It already feels very vulnerable for me, and I had developed a fair amount of like tools and comfort blankets that I would do when I would go out in public spaces and talk about the work, share the work, and all that. Um, and I also knew the things that made it so worth it to have it be scary. I really love the personal interactions that can take place for people that are affirmed by the work. Um, I feel like I can also um, to be able to read a room and read people's body language as I am speaking helps me actually just feel safer because I can tell how things are landing for people who might not have heard that much about somebody's trans experience. I might be the first trans person they've ever talked to or heard share their story. So it helps me kind of gauge comfort, my own personal safety, and just kind of create a connection. Like even as I'm doing this, I also use my body language a lot. So for me, it's difficult because the way that I connect, which is physical with people, a little bit more one-on-one, feels absent. And so often with technology, sometimes I can still see faces, but with like a lot of live streams and even Instagram, it's a lot more of a feeling of surrendering things out into the void and not knowing how it's landing, if people are seeing it at all, just where it's going.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is you took over Blue Sky's Instagram account this week, and you've had to deal with censorship, on the Instagram account. So what's that? How have you been dealing with that?
um I tried a couple tactics. Emojis were really fun to try and cover what was seen as inappropriate with a whole bunch of kittens and roosters. That also got taken down. So it's a little tiring. It's a bit frustrating. And I feel like you could go into a topic of censorship over social media accounts. That's like a long conversation of where you can um, go into how it's weaponized for silencing certain people's voices. But for me personally, um, it's frustrating to have something when you are sharing something so vulnerable that is your truth that you are celebrating and having it deemed inappropriate for people's consumption, which is I just try not to take it personally. And at the same time, it sucks because given that galleries aren't open right now, it creates a little bit of uh, a little bit of a conundrum of how to share the work to still get it out there to people and what can be shared, right?
Yeah, have you been able to find ways around that kind of stuff as well as, ways to connect with people in a more personal way when you can't physically be there with them?
Yeah, it's a real. I'm happy I'm an artist. I can use that creative thinking tool to try and think of other ways. So I've been a part of a few online shows since the pandemic has started, and that's been really great. I learned a lot. The Five Oaks Museum put on um, a show called Gender Euphoria, which is a really beautiful show. It was meant to be an in person show. They switched it to virtual, and they had a lot of really inspiring public programming as a way to engage people. So I participated in that, did not lead anything, but it was a great learning opportunity for me. Um, and then I've also just tried to find ways to connect with just other artists I know, having kind of more personal photo crit groups, photo encouragement groups, just kind of as a way to uplift and support each other and um, help us all think what we can do in these times to keep going for our own enjoyment. A lot of the other artists that I'm talking to, we do a lot of our art because we love it, but it's just so much of how we process life that we can't help but make it. So how to encourage each other to keep going.
The other thing I'm wondering is that, since so much of your work challenges, you mentioned this earlier, are like limited language around gender and just pushes up against the limits of what people, especially queer people, are told what we can be or can't be. So, in that context, is it at all exciting to be producing art in this time when there are all these conversations about basically how do we reshape society and prevent things from going back to normal?
It it is really exciting. It is really exciting. It's always still a little nerve-wracking. I feel like a lot for me personally is also listening to a whole lot of people who do kind of harness that gift of language as we are reshaping language, as we are reshaping how we talk about things. I find it's more a process right now of listening to them and creating from that the visuals of my understanding of the brilliant things that they're saying, I guess.